The
I have
Saturday
something
morning
special
sun
for you.
filtered through the
Oh my
large
gosh, it's
windows of Maple
beautiful!
Grove Cafe,
Wow, it's so
casting
pretty!
warm light across the wooden tables and making the whole place feel like it was wrapped in honey. The cafe was bustling with the weekend crowd, families ordering pancakes, couples lingering over coffee, solo diners reading newspapers while nursing their second or third cup. At a corner table, Ben Carter sat with his daughter Sophie, who was 6 years old with blonde curls that never quite stayed in the ponytail he attempted each morning. She wore a bright pink dress, her favorite, the one she insisted on, wearing at least twice a week, and was coloring intently on the paper placemat the waitress had provided. Ben was 41, his dark hair showing touches of gray that seemed to have appeared overnight. About 2 years ago, he wore a simple blue t-shirt and khaki pants, casual weekend wear for their Saturday morning tradition. This cafe visit had become a ritual, something he and Sophie did every week, rain or shine. It gave structure to their weekends, which otherwise felt too empty, too quiet, too full of missing pieces. His wife Caroline had died 2 years earlier, cancer fast and merciless. She'd been 38, vibrant and full of life one day, gone 6 months later. Sophie had been 4, old enough to understand that Mommy was sick, but too young to fully grasp that she wasn't coming back. Ben was still figuring out how to be both parents, how to do the ponytails and pick out the clothes and answer the questions about why other kids had mommies and Sophie didn't. Most days he felt like he was failing, but Sophie seemed happy enough, and that was what mattered. "Daddy, look," Sophie said, holding up her placemat. "I drew our family." Ben looked at the crayon drawing. 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. A sun in the corner, a house with a triangle roof and square windows. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." "Is that you and me?" "Uh-huh. And that's our house. And the sun because it's a happy day." "It is a happy day," Ben agreed, though his chest tightened the way it always did when he noticed the absence in Sophie's drawings. No third figure, no mommy. Just the 2 of them, alone together. The cafe was getting more crowded, and Ben noticed people starting to hover near empty tables, waiting for seats. That's when he saw her. A woman in her early 30s with light brown hair pulled back simply, wearing a pale pink sleeveless shirt and jeans. She moved through the cafe in a wheelchair, maneuvering carefully between tables, looking for an empty spot. Her expression was pleasant but slightly uncertain, the look of someone trying not to inconvenience anyone. Their table was meant for 4, with 2 empty chairs across from Ben and Sophie. The woman stopped near them, hesitating. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but would it be okay if I sat here? Everywhere else seems to be full." Ben looked up and immediately started to say yes. But before he could speak, Sophie beat him to it. "Yes," Sophie said enthusiastically. "You can sit with us. We have lots of room." The woman smiled, her whole face lighting up. "Thank you. That's very kind." She positioned her wheelchair at the table, and Ben found himself doing a quick mental inventory of whether they were in her way, whether she had enough room, trying not to be awkward about it and probably being awkward anyway. "I'm Ben," he said. "This is my daughter, Sophie." "I'm Jessica," the woman said. "It's nice to meet you both." "I like your shirt," Sophie announced. "Pink is my favorite color." "Mine too," Jessica said. "Great minds think alike." Sophie beamed, immediately won over. The waitress came by, and Jessica ordered coffee and a breakfast sandwich. After she left, and slightly awkward silence settled over the table. Ben wasn't sure if he should make conversation or give Jessica space. He'd never been good at small talk even before Caroline died, and grief had made him even more socially rusty. But Sophie had no such reservations. "Why do you have a wheelchair?" she asked with the blunt curiosity of children everywhere. "Sophie," Ben said quickly, "that's not—" "You shouldn't ask." But Jessica laughed, a genuine sound. "It's okay. It's a fair question. I have a wheelchair because my legs don't work very well. I was in a car accident a few years ago and it hurt my spine. So now I use the wheelchair to get around." "Does it hurt?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide with concern. "Sometimes a little, but mostly I'm used to it now. It's just part of my life." "Can you still do fun things?" "Absolutely. I can do almost everything, just sometimes in a different way. I can go to movies and restaurants and parks. I can work and see my friends. The wheelchair helps me do all those things. Sophie considered this seriously, then nodded. That's good. Everyone should get to do fun things. I agree, Jessica said, and Ben saw warmth in her eyes when she looked at his daughter. They fell into easy conversation after that. Jessica asked Sophie about her drawing, and Sophie explained every detail with the enthusiasm of a child who's found an interested adult. Jessica listened with genuine attention, asking questions, making Sophie giggle with her responses. Ben found himself relaxing, watching this stranger be kind to his daughter. It had been a long time since he'd had a normal conversation with another adult that didn't revolve around work or Sophie's, school, or the logistics of single parenting. What do you do? Ben asked Jessica when Sophie returned to her coloring. I'm a graphic designer. I work from home mostly, which is great. Flexible hours, I can work in my pajamas if I want. She smiled. What about you? I'm an accountant. Not as exciting as graphic design, I'm afraid. I don't know. Numbers have their own kind of beauty. Order, logic, everything balancing out in the end. I like to think so. Though my daughter would probably disagree. She thinks my job is boring. It's very boring, Sophie interjected without looking up from her drawing. Daddy looks at numbers all day. Jessica laughed. Well, everyone can't be an artist like you, Sophie. They talked about small things, the cafe's good coffee, the nice weather, the challenges of finding parking downtown. Ben learned that Jessica had moved to the area 6 months ago for a fresh start after her accident, that she was still finding her way around. Making new friends, building a new life. It's hard starting over, Jessica said. Especially when you're doing it alone. But I'm figuring it out. I understand that, Ben said quietly. Starting over. Doing it alone. It's harder than people think. Something in his tone made Jessica look at him more closely. Sophie's mother? She died 2 years ago, cancer. I'm so sorry. Thank you. It's been an adjustment. For both of us. They were quiet for a moment, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood that some losses didn't need extensive explanation. Sophie, who'd been listening even while coloring, suddenly looked at Jessica with serious eyes. My mommy is in heaven. Daddy says she watches over me. I'm sure she does, Jessica said gently. And I bet she's very proud of what a sweet, kind girl you are. Do you have a mommy? I do. She lives in another state, but I talk to her on the phone every week. That's good. Everyone needs a mommy. The simple statement hung in the air. Ben felt his throat tighten, the way it always did when Sophie said things that revealed how much she noticed the gap in her life. Jessica reached across the table and gently touched Sophie's hand. You're right, and I think your mommy loved you very much, even though she can't be here, and your daddy is doing a wonderful job taking care of you. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to her drawing. Ben mouthed thank you to Jessica, who just nodded with understanding. They finished their breakfast, and when it was time to leave, Sophie surprised Ben by hugging Jessica. Can you come have breakfast with us again? Sophie asked. Jessica looked at Ben, clearly not wanting to overstep. If your daddy says it's okay, I'd like that very much. It's okay, Ben heard himself say. We're here every Saturday morning. Same table if we can get it. You're welcome to join us. Then I'll see you next week, Jessica said. And she did. The following Saturday she was there, sitting at their usual table with a coffee already ordered. Sophie ran to her with delight, and Ben felt something warm uncurl in his chest at the sight. It became their new routine. 3 people instead of 2. Jessica became a regular part of their Saturday mornings, and then gradually other parts of their lives. She came to Sophie's school art show. She joined them for pizza on Friday nights. She taught Sophie how to use design software to make digital art. And slowly, carefully, she and Ben became friends. Real friends, the kind who could talk about hard things and easy things, who could sit in comfortable silence, who could make each other laugh, who could be honest about their struggles without judgment. I wasn't sure I'd ever feel normal again, Jessica told Ben one evening while Sophie played in the next room. They were at Ben's house, having dinner together as they now did regularly. After the accident, I felt broken, like I'd never be whole again. Do you feel whole now? Ben asked. Getting there. It helps having people who see past the wheelchair. Who see me? I do see you. And what I see is someone remarkable. Jessica looked at him, something shifting in her expression. Ben, I know it's complicated. I have Sophie to think about. And you're still rebuilding your life and we're friends. But I need you to know that what I feel for you, it's more than friendship. It has been for a while now. I feel it too, Jessica said quietly. I have for months. But I didn't want to assume, didn't want to complicate things. What if we let things be complicated? What if we try? Jessica smiled. I'd like that. They took it slow. Dates when Sophie was with Ben's parents. Long conversations late at night after Sophie was asleep. Gradually integrating Jessica more and more into their lives. Making sure Sophie was comfortable every step of the way. Sophie was more than comfortable. She adored Jessica. And Jessica adored her right back, never trying to replace Caroline, but carving out her own important space in Sophie's life. A year after that first breakfast, Ben proposed. Nothing elaborate. Just the three of them at the cafe where they'd met. At their regular table, with Sophie in on the secret and barely able to contain her excitement. Jessica, Ben said, holding out a ring, will you marry me? Will you be part of our family officially? Yes, Jessica said through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. Sophie cheered so loudly that everyone in the cafe turned to look, and then started applauding when they realized what was happening. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony in Ben's backyard. Sophie was the flower girl, taking her responsibilities very seriously. Caroline's parents were there, giving their blessing, grateful that Ben and Sophie had found happiness again. The evening of the wedding, after the guests had gone and Sophie was asleep, Ben and Jessica sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Do you think Caroline would approve? Jessica asked. It was the first time she'd directly addressed the question that had probably crossed both their minds. I think she'd be grateful, Ben said, that Sophie has someone else to love her. That I'm not alone anymore, that we're happy. Yeah, I think she'd approve. I hope so. I'll never try to replace her. Sophie's memories of her mother are sacred. I know, and that's part of why I love you. You understand that loving you doesn't mean forgetting her. That hearts are big enough for both. Jessica leaned her head on his shoulder. When I asked if I could sit at your table that day, I never imagined it would lead here. Neither did I, but I'm glad you asked. I'm glad Sophie said yes before I could. She has good instincts, that kid. The best. Years later, when people asked Ben how he'd met his wife, he'd tell them about the crowded cafe, the wheelchair, the simple question, can I sit here? He'd tell them about Sophie's immediate yes, about how his daughter had seen past surface things to the person underneath, how a 6-year-old's instinctive kindness had opened the door to everything that followed. And he'd tell them that sometimes the best things in life come from the smallest acts of generosity, from sharing a table, from making room, from saying yes when you could just as easily say no. Jessica would add that sometimes being vulnerable enough to ask for help leads you exactly where you need to be, that the fear of rejection is nothing compared to the possibility of connection. And Sophie, now older but still wise beyond her years, would say that everyone should share their table, that there's always room for one more. That kindness is never wasted. 3 people brought together by chance in a crowded cafe, a widower and his daughter trying to navigate life after loss, a woman in a wheelchair rebuilding after tragedy, all of them carrying wounds, all of them healing. And somehow, in the simple act of sharing space, they'd found family. Not a replacement for what was lost. You can't replace people who mattered. But something new, something built on acceptance and understanding, and the willingness to let others in. Sometimes the question, can I sit here, is about more than finding a seat. Sometimes it's about finding home, about discovering that the spaces in our lives we thought were just empty are actually opportunities, places where new people can fit, new love can grow, new families can form. Ben learned that letting someone new in didn't diminish what he'd had with Caroline. Jessica learned that her accident didn't define her, that she could still build a full, rich life. And Sophie learned what her mother would have wanted her to know, that love multiplies rather than divides, that there's always room for more kindness, more connection, more family. All because a woman asked a question and a little girl said yes.